The Time Machine, Chapter 5, Strange Little People. Now that I had a chance for a closer look at these future men, I noted some strange qualities. They all had curly hair that ended sharply at the neck and cheek. Their china-like faces had no trace of hair. They had unusually small ears, pointy chins, and tiny mouths with thinnish red lips. As for their eyes, they were large, with a dull look at them, as if they were not much interested in the world around them. They just stood there smiling, speaking softly, and cooing to each other. Clearly it was up to me to start the conversation, if we were going to communicate at all. I thought I would begin by pointing to my craft. "Time machine," I said. Then I touched my chest. "I came in machine." There was no response so far. To express the idea of time, the way I had traveled, I pointed to the sun. "Sun," I said. "You know, planets go round and round, make days, months, and years." Silence. Then one of the little purple-clad creatures stepped forward. He too pointed skyward, but still did not speak. 802,701 AD, I thought. Men must have become very bright. Maybe he's reading my mind and instantly translating my language. I could hardly wait to hear what he would say. What brilliant evidence of wisdom in art, science, or the universe will his comments reveal? I wondered. To my intense disappointment, all he did was point to the sun and go blam in imitation of a thunderclap. Oh no. His response showed me that he had the mentality of one of the 5-year-old children. He wanted to know if I had come from the sun in a thunderstorm. For a moment I felt I'd built the time machine for nothing. So this is the future man, I thought, light-limbed, fragile-faced, and baby-brained? I nodded, pointed to the sun, and made a loud thunder sound. Blam! Startled, they drew back a few steps and bowed. Then one laughing man came back carrying a chain of beautiful flowers. He put it around my neck as the others cooed and applauded. Then they all began to run to and fro for flowers and laughingly flung them at me until I almost was smothered in the most fantastic blossoms I had ever seen. These delicate, colorful blooms were obviously the result of many centuries of culture. I stared in wonder at the blue-green puff, the rosy-orange clusters, and the gold-fringe ruffles. Their aroma was like a shop counter of perfume bottles suddenly uncapped. Then one of them must have decided that I should be exhibited to all the other people, so they led me gently past the white sphinx to a vast gray building of ridged stone. Crowds of these little people were gathering by the enormous door which opened before me, shadowy and mysterious. The arch of the doorway, I noted as I passed through, had ancient carvings on it. These carvings were badly broken and weather-worn. "Looks like this place has seen better days," I said. The big doorway opened onto a great hall, whose roof was in shadows. Its windows were partly coated with colored glass and partly uncoated, an effect which left in a softened light. The floor was made up of huge blocks of very hard white metal. Plenty of footsteps, whole generations of them, must have worn those tracks, I thought. I looked at the most often used routes. Long, low tables made of polished stone slabs and raised about a foot off the floor filled the hall. An abundance of cushions were scattered about, and the little ones who had brought me were promptly plumped themselves down on them. They motioned for me to do likewise, and I did so. I looked around the hall slowly and was amazed by its broken-down appearance. The stained glass windows were cracked in many places. The curtains on their lower end were thick with dust, and the corners of the marble tables were chipped. Without any ceremony, the little people reached for the fruits heaped on the table. They began to eat them with their hands, flinging peels and pits into the round opening on the side of the table. Looks like every day's a picnic here, I said. Well, I'm both hungry and thirsty, so count me in, and thank you. Except for some rather over-dried raspberries and oranges, the fruit was all completely new to me. However, after tasting a blue, cottony blob, a purplish wire, and a little green heart, I found them to be juicy and filling. Say, this tastes good, I said, as I held up a floury beige thing in a three-sided shell. What do you call it? They just giggled and went on eating. I found out later that the fruit was the only food they ate. They must be vegetarians, I reasoned, because horses, cattle, sheep, dogs, birds, and fish had probably become extinct. I decided the next thing for me to do was to learn their language. This proved to be a harder job than I had expected. Holding up one of the fruit, I asked again, "What do you call this?" My question was met with blank stares. I picked up another fruit, pointed to it, and said again, "What your word for this?" I even raised my eyebrows in questioning expression. Again, nothing but stares and laughter. Finally, one fair-haired creature caught on and murmured, "Glina, Glina," I quickly repeated. They began to chatter and explain the business at great length to each other. "Glina, Glina, Glina," went down the line, with a lot of giggling and pointing. My first attempts to imitate the little musical sounds of their language brought on peals of laughter. It was a strange situation. Here I was, trying to learn from them, but I felt like a serious school teacher among a class of playful children. I persisted, though, and after some time at least, I could name a few things in their language. I had learned Arla, Arna, and even the all-important Namni, this, that, and to eat. But it was hard work getting them to pay attention. I had never met people who were more lazy or more easily tired. I was amazed, too, by their lack of interest. Here I was, a stranger and different-looking creature, dropped into their midst. Oh, they would come up to me with eager cries of surprise, all right, but then, like children bored with a new toy, they would wander away in search of some other plaything. When I walked out of the great hall, the calm of evening was on the world, lit by the warm glow of the setting sun. I should get a wider view of our planet in the year 800, 2701, I thought. I therefore decided to climb to the top of the crest about 1.5 miles away. Everything I passed looked so different, even the Thames River, so close to my home in Richmond, seemed to have shifted its position 1 mile away. A little way up the hill, I came upon a big granite and metal ruin, the remains of some vast structure. Amid its crumbled walls were thick heaps of beautiful pagoda-shaped bushes with tinted brown leaves. What could this building have been used for originally, I wondered? Although I couldn't have known it at this time, it was right here that I would soon have a very weird experience and get the first hint of an even weirder discovery, but more of that later. Chapter 6. The Time Machine Vanishes. As I sat resting on the hill, it struck me as odd that there were no small houses round, only palace-like buildings. Had the single cottage, maybe the family too, disappeared? Looking back at the half-dozen little figures who were following me, I realized still another way in which things were different from our day. These people all had the same girlishly rounded limbs and hairless faces, and they all wore the same silky soft type of tunic. Looking at them now, I couldn't distinguish the men from the women. What's more, the children seemed like slightly smaller versions of their parents. I began to puzzle out how this similarity of the sexes had come about. It had to be because they lived a life of security and ease. It's only in the age of physical force, I told myself, that men must be strong fighters and women soft homebodies. But when there is no violence and there is no need for the family unit, so the special roles of male and female in caring for children's needs have disappeared. These ideas sounded convincing, but before long I was to discover how very wrong my fine-sounding conclusions were. I pushed on to the crest of the hill, passing something that looked like a well with a cupola or dome top covering it. My, I remember marveling to myself. So that old-fashioned way of getting water has survived this long into the future. At the top of the hill, I found a seat of a yellow metal that was unfamiliar to me. The seat was pitted with a pinkish rust and was half smothered in moss. Each of its armrests was shaped like the head of a griffin, that mythical beast, with the head and wings of an eagle and the body and hind legs of a lion. From here I had an excellent view. The sun had sunk below the horizon, and the western sky was a flaming gold, touched with horizontal bars of purple and red. Below was the Thames River valley, with the river like a shiny steel band. As my eyes traveled over the land, I saw great palaces, some in ruins and some that looked lived in, dotting the assorted greenery. Here and there were huge white or silver statues, but there were no private homes, no hedges or fences to mark off property, and absolutely no sign of farming. The earth had become one huge wild garden, and again I found myself wondering, what has happened to mankind since my day? It certainly looks like it is dying out. I reasoned that evidently man had reached some kind of peak in his accomplishments. He had managed to wipe out disease, and he had perfected plants to nourish himself easily, for I saw no weeds or bugs around. Here's a mystery here, I told myself. How come the little people are so well dressed, yet I never see anybody at work? And there are no transportation vehicles or traffic either. What about the shops and businesses and factories that played such important parts of everyday life in my time? While I was in this curious mood, one question led to another. How did the people on my planet get so soft and empty-headed? I could only guess at the answer. I'll bet that not having to work has ruined humanity. Men need to struggle, to face hardships in order to be strong, energetic, and intelligent. Then how did I explain these little people? With no wars, animals, or diseases to fight, the weak people survived better than the strong because they weren't as restless, and they lived a life of contented idleness. It seemed to me that even man's artistic spirit was gone. I had seen no evidence of great new paintings, murals, or sculptures. I had heard no melodious music, instruments, nor ringing choruses of human voices. All that reminded of the arts was seen in the little peoples decorating themselves with flowers and singing and dancing in the sunlight. What a simple explanation, and so believable too. There was only one thing the matter with it. It was completely wrong. Yes, I was soon to learn the surprising and terrible truth. Ready to descend from the hill as the full moon came up, I noticed that the bright little figures had stopped moving about the valley below. I looked for the building I knew, and my eye traveled to the white sphinx on the bronze pedestal. But something was wrong. I could see the silver birch against it, and the purple rhododendrons, black now in the pale moonlight around it. There, too, was the little lawn I had landed on. Or was it? No, I cried out. No, it cannot be the same lawn. Yet the Sphinx was facing it. But the time machine was gone. I mustn't be marooned in this strange world, I thought, running down the slope frantic with fear. Once I fell and cut my face, but jumped up and ran on, ignoring the warm trickle of blood down my cheek and chin. I must have covered the 2 miles from the crest to the lawn in 10 minutes. I ran around the black triangle of rhododendron bushes furiously, but finally stopped, my hands clutching my hair in agony. Above me, the great white sphinx seemed to be smiling, mocking my dismay. "My machine!" I cried. "How has this huge machine disappeared?" I had to stop my panic and try to think clearly. Perhaps the Eloi, as the little people were called, might have wanted to help me by moving it to a sheltered spot, but I knew very well that they had neither the brains nor the muscle power to budge the thing. "It can't have been taken on another time's trip," I told myself, "for I have the stop and start levels right here in my pocket." I fingered them in my pocket nervously as I faced up the frightening fact that some other power I hadn't yet met up with had taken my invention. I must have hit the edge of madness when I remember running in and out of the bushes around the Sphinx, yelling, "Where is it? Where can it be?" I remember startling some white animal, which, in the dim light, I took for a small deer. Then, sobbing and raving, I headed for the great stone building. The big hall was dark, silent, and deserted. I slipped on the uneven floor and fell over one of the marble tables, almost breaking my shin. I lit a match and went into a second great hall, where about 20 of the little people were sleeping on cushions. "Where is my time machine?" I bawled, grabbing them and shaking them. What a dumb thing for me to do. Some of the little people laughed, and others looked frightened. This, by the way, surprised me because I had thought man had forgotten fear in this day and age. I ran out into the moonlight, sobbing and screaming wildly. "Lord, how could they do this to me? Is this my fate, to be a strange animal in a world I don't know?" I flung myself down on the ground near the white sphinx, crying continuously until I finally fell asleep. I awoke in a different mood. In the freshness of the morning, I still felt sad, but I was calmer now, thinking more clearly and determined to try to make some plans. Maybe if I had to, I could eventually find the materials to build another time machine, but before I attempted that, I had to be certain that it hadn't been taken and hidden. If that were so, I had to find the machine's hiding place and get it back, either by force or by cunning. Chapter 7. Weena of the Eloi. In my search for my missing time machine, I couldn't help noticing a large number of round, well-shaped structures, like the one I had seen before. I tried to peer down one of them, but couldn't see any bottom. There was, however, a dull thudding sound coming from them, as though from some engine. My time machine wouldn't be down there, I thought. The opening is too narrow, and there's no point in questioning the Eloi any further. That's a complete waste of time, because they either don't understand my gestures or laugh at them as if they were entertaining them as a comedy show. Actually investigating the ground helped me more, for on it I saw signs of my machine being dragged. Alongside were peculiar narrow footprints, like those a sloth might make. I followed those tracks to the side of the bronze pedestal of the Sphinx, and there I found an interesting surprise. "The side of the pedestal has panels in it," I cried. "They're doors that open from the inside. So that's where my machine is. I must get inside. But how?" When some of the little people passed, I signaled and called, "Say, how can I get these doors open?" Their response startled me. These faces that always seemed only to laugh and sing were suddenly covered with an expression of horror. I began to bang my fists on the panels. Once I thought I heard a chuckle inside, but nothing happened. I ran to the river for a rock, then banged even harder till I flattened part of the brass covering. Nothing. "Well," I said to myself, "you won't get anywhere this way. Be calm and think sensibly." Face this world and learn its ways. Don't jump to conclusions, and maybe in the end you'll find a few clues. So I kept on trying to learn more of their language, but it was a joke. Their words were as limited as their minds. Then I made a special friend. It happened in this way. One day, some of the Eloi were swimming in the shallow part of the river. Suddenly, one of them ran into trouble. She seemed to have developed a cramp, and the current was carrying her downstream. In spite of her poor little cries, nobody moved to help her. Everyone continued swimming, splashing, and frolicking in the water as if she didn't exist. "Hey, look over there!" I shouted from the bank. "One of you, go get her!" I couldn't believe it. There she was, about to drown right before their very eyes, and they just ignored her. What strange creatures! "Don't cry, little one. I'll save you," I called, hoping my voice would cheer her, even though she did not understand my language. Quickly I slipped off my jacket and waded in at a point lower downstream. There I was able to catch the pathetic little thing as the current was dragging her, and pulled her safely to land. The truth is, I had such a low opinion of her people that I didn't expect her to express any thanks for what I had done. Once again, I was wrong. Later that day, when I came back from exploring the area, I found the little woman I had rescued waiting for me. She greeted me with cries of delight and gave me a huge garland of flowers, which apparently she had made especially for me. I tried as best I could to let her know I was pleased, and we sat down to talk to each other. At first our conversation was mostly smiles. I thought of her as a happy child. She told me her name was Weena. "Hand," I said, holding my hand to her. At first she merely giggled, and then, out of a strong urge to please me, I guess, she attempted to repeat the word. But later, when I held her little hand and asked, "Nuti, Arla, what is this?" she looked blank. Clearly, it was up to me to learn Eloi talk. From now on, when I tell you what she said to me, you must understand that she spoke her own language, not ours. There was a strange song that Weena and the others sang, a chant that was accompanied by a little dance. Even after I learned the meaning of the words, I still didn't understand what it was all about. I took it to be some childish nursery rhyme. "In the light time, dance and leap, gather flowers, laugh and sing. When the moon comes, danger springs and pulls the Eloi underground. To the place where evil dwells, from that dark, none return." Many a time as I watched Weena go through the actions of the song, I smiled, completely unaware of its grim message. From Weena I learned that fear had not left the world. Although she was at ease in the daylight, she dreaded the night, with its shadows and darkness. This and the song set me to thinking and observing. I noticed that the little people always gathered into the great houses after dark and slept in crowds. If I ever entered at night without a light, it threw them into a panic. I never found an Eloi outside once darkness fell, nor sleeping alone indoors at night. But I was still such a blockhead that I totally missed the reason for their fear. Even though it troubled Weena a lot, I insisted on sleeping away from all the crowds. My meeting with Weena soon blocked from my mind a horrible dream that I had had the night before I met her, the night I had cried myself to sleep. Still, every so often the nightmare came back into my thoughts. I remember how I had cried out, "Help, help, I'm drowning." Now I'm at the bottom of the sea. Ugh! What are these horrible sea plants brushing all over my face? Help! I had awakened, startled, with the odd impression that some grayish animal had just rushed out of the hall. I was confused about what the dream and what reality was. I left the great hall in the eerie time between dying moonlight and pale dawn. As I looked up the hill, I thought I saw some white, ape-like creature running about. One of them seemed to be carrying a body, but as the sky grew brighter, I didn't see them any more. They must have been ghosts, I joked to myself. I wonder when they lived. How could I have been such a blind fool? Then the next day I rescued Weena, and all impressions of ghosts and white animals were driven from my mind. On my 4th morning in that year, I was looking for shelter from the blazing sun, and thinking how much hotter it was then in our time. In a colossal ruin near the great hall, where I slept and ate, I found a dark, shaded area and entered it, groping along the fallen masses of stone. Suddenly I stopped spellbound. A pair of shiny eyes were watching me in the darkness.